Thank you for joining us, everyone. You're joining the Talking Pricing, Setting the Right Price for Profitability and Growth workshop, which is workshop 3 in the Cost of Doing Business series that Business Tasmania is delivering with the Tasmania Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So it's great to be here today with Mikala Grossi and special guest Danielle Slade from Rural Business Tasmania. So I'd like to start firstly by acknowledging the Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. But I'll shortly be handing over to Mikala and Danielle to talk through some great things to help you out with running your business. But I'd firstly like to mention throughout the session and then after the session, you might think, where can I go to for extra help? And so I wanted just to let you know that you can come back to the Business Tasmania team and we can connect you with a business advisor in the new Business Support Pilot Program or the Tasmanian Business Advice Service for help to further work on what you're about to hear about. So if you're thinking about starting a business or your Australian business number is less than 12 months old, you can get started with 2 hours of free advice in the new Business Support Pilot Program. Once your Australian business number is 12 months old, then you can actually then go on to access 5 hours of free advice each financial year. So I wanted just to let you know that that support is there and available for you now. So as you're thinking through everything that's covered and you think, oh, wow, who could I talk more about this? You know where to go to. And Danielle was actually one of our advisors as well. So at that point, what I'll do is I'll actually hand over to Mikala to start the session. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Kelly. And welcome, Danielle. So nice to see you again.
Indeed.
All right. So are you okay if we jump straight in with the first question?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. All right. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what is a pricing strategy and why is it critical for business success?
Yeah, excellent. So a pricing strategy is a bit more than just choosing a number. So it's using a deliberate method for setting prices that align with your business goals, your brand positioning, your customers' expectation and your financial realities. So the right pricing strategy ensures that you're not only covering your costs, but also generating some healthy margins, because that's what we're looking for, sustaining your operations and reinforcing how customers perceive your value. It helps you remain competitive without undercutting your worth, giving you the confidence to price intentionally rather than reactively. So without a pricing strategy, your pricing becomes a guess, and guessing is rarely profitable.
Fantastic.
And so how pricing might impact your profitability and market positioning. So sometimes the right price can boost your profits and signal your brand's quality, while poor pricing can damage both. So an example of that might be, I've worked with a florist in the past and we kind of looked at her brand and how she was positioning herself in the market. And she decided that what she was going to do is increase her prices by about 20%, but focus on luxury, on providing a product where the customer is looking at that value. They're willing to pay more because they're looking at that kind of brand or that value that they're looking for in the product that they're pursuing.
And how do businesses choose the right strategy for their goals?
Absolutely. So I'm always going to start, the first place is data. You need to have good data. So as Kelly mentioned, this session is a part of a series. So there are some other ones in the series that talk about how you can actually set up your business so that you're gathering all of that information so that you can make that informed kind of decision about how is the best, what is required for you to be meeting all of your overheads and actually getting to a point where you're making profit.
Fantastic. And where are some places that people can start to make these changes? Like, what do they want to look for?
So when we're first starting this process, I like to implement the effort versus impact matrix. Yeah. So this idea of all business owners tend to have 100 things they have to do and only a set number of minutes to do them in. I need 2 minutes for every minute that I have to get all the things I need to do. So sometimes it starts off by actually stepping back and saying, well, hang on, first of all, are there any quick wins that I can focus on first? So where are those low effort, high impact changes? So tweaking pricing structures, bundling products or offering tiered packages, which is a great option. It's a little bit like the Three Bears. If you have one set price and then suddenly offer your customer, you know, 1, 2, or 3, sometimes what that leads to is, you know, customers pick, you know, more often than not, Mama Bear. So instead of you, everyone having like a lower price point, you've got that opportunity where a customer can make a decision, and in that process increase your revenue. So an example that I can give for that is I've worked with a person who had a dog wash, and so she's implemented tiered pricing. And what she found is customers that had typically had her original basic rate, almost all of them tended to pick either the middle or top tier because they saw it as a value proposition. I'm getting more for what I'm paying for.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And then I would also go on to say that it also, with a pricing strategy, it helps you like focus on what's going to make you more profitable. So obviously those big ticket things like rebranding or trying new markets, these are all things that can work in the medium to longer term. But sometimes it's about allowing small business to be focusing on improving revenue and profitability quickly, get a few quick wins, and then that's going to give you the capacity to look at some of those bigger areas. So I know that I've got a friend who actually runs a fish and chip shop, and they were initially had their structures set up so that their drinks were all just $2, which is a great price for a can of Coke. But what they found is that for most people, they just bundled that item into a meal that they were already buying. And so they didn't actually notice that they were getting such a great deal unless they were buying it as an individual item. And what it meant was once they started pricing appropriately and at the lower end of the market, so they still weren't sort of gouging their clients, their overall sales not only improved by about 30%, they also found that they had a culture in their business where their staff were quite welcome to help themselves to drinks. And what they found is that they just, you know, sometimes things get a little bit out of control, and because they weren't managing it closely, what they'd noticed by doing that improved management of the pricing, etc., is they started to notice that they were buying about 3 cases of vanilla Coke every week, but only selling 2 or 3 cans because that was her preferred beverage. So she was probably, you know, not intentionally taking advantage, but certainly just every time I'm hot, which happens a lot in a fish and chip shop, she's grabbing a Coke. And so what that meant is that they could actually not only improve their revenue and their overall profit, but also it made them actually define their processes and their expectations within their staff a bit more clearly.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Mm.
So is there anything else, any other gold that you wanted to add to this question, Danielle, before we moved on?
No, I think that one's a good one. I think, we sort of covered that. It's all about that data, because we can't make good decisions without good information. And so that first step is knowing where you are so that you can find those little things that you can tweak.
Fantastic. I love that. Okay, so here's a good one for you. What are the most common pricing mistakes that you see, and how can businesses avoid them?
Yeah. So this is what is so common. So oftentimes we fall into that trap of either pricing based on emotion, what our competitors are doing, even to the point of fear of losing customers. But the problem is that this can often lead to setting our prices too low and forgetting to factor in all of your costs, especially your time. I see it time and time again where we've got a great business and everyone's busy and we're covering costs, but when we break it down, the actual owner's getting $2 an hour. And so that's not worthy of your time. So we need to find a way where we're actually pricing so that we're actually factoring in that you get paid for the efforts that you're undertaking. Making these errors really quickly erodes your margins, and it can make your business feel like it's unsustainable. Even if you're working hard, it just feels like there's just never enough money because we don't seem to be getting anywhere. So the first step, you need to know your break-even point. That sort of point where we've covered all of our costs, so there's no profit, but there's also no loss. Because from that point forward, we can then make strategies to build and set prices that result in profit, but also be making enough money to invest in those bigger strategies. Sometimes it's not about paying your wage. Sometimes it's about having the resources to actually make changes, restructure, improve your equipment, find more competitive ways to actually do business.
Danielle, before we move on, can you just tell us a bit more about what the break-even point is, just in case we've got any brand new businesses here that are not familiar with that?
Yeah. And if you go and touch the internet, you'll probably end up with 10 different ways to try and come up with a break-even point, and most of them are going to sound like the kind of equation that there's 7 people on a train, 2 have a triangle, how many apples do you have? And it just won't make sense. But the really, really, really simple way to get a break-even point is basically your revenue, so the money that we're coming in from sales, minus your direct costs, so the things that you've spent to actually facilitate those sales, that becomes your gross margin. And then your gross margin minus your fixed costs, things like rent, utilities, your wage, that becomes your profit. So once we've covered our direct costs and our fixed costs, we're now at a point of break even. And in my world, we call that once we're at the point where we're making cream. This is the point where you've now got dollars that are either directly going to improve your standard of living because you're going to have more income for yourself as a business owner, or allow you to divert those dollars into something strategic that's going to hopefully compound that profit going forward.
Mm.
So I'll give you an example. A big one for that one that happens all the time is people, particularly in food service, they know all of the costs for the actual costs of food, but we sometimes lose track of things like packaging, which can be an enormous cost. And if it's not factored in, then you could be selling an item for less than you're actually, you're not even covering your costs. So you're covering your food costs, but you're not actually covering your full costs or that item's share of all of those fixed costs as well.
Have you got anything to say on low pricing? Like, we're kind of talking about that already, but what else have you got to say on that?
Yeah, so I actually don't necessarily think that that's always the way to go. So even if you're trying to do pricing where you're trying to attract customers, I'm going to always say we're probably better off to offer some kind of deal rather than a low price. So for example, if you're a cleaner, that might look like, the first 2 cleans, you get a discount, or there's a discount coupon, or you try and see if you can build some brand loyalty, like saying to a customer, here are my fixed rates for my cleaning service, but I have a deal on at the moment where your 5th clean is free or your 10th clean is free. So it's still going to be a bit of a lure for a client or a customer, but you're not going to get yourself in a situation where the customer starts to consider that discounted price to be actually what you're worth. And so when you come back to them and try and say, yes, I know that I was doing that for $25 an hour, but now I want $45 an hour, sometimes you can just lose that. All of that rapport that you've built with the customer, all of that brand loyalty can go out the window because they kind of have a perception that somehow, they're being ripped off or that you're taking advantage. Whereas if you can actually be in a situation where you're offering them some value to start, and then hopefully by being able to be in business with them and provide them a service, they'll then see that you are a value proposition.
I like that. That was a really good example.
I think the other one to be aware of too is you don't necessarily want to be only hunting after discount hunters, because they're not a loyal customer. Just as easy as you've acquired them, you could lose them. And again, you are damaging your brand and you're undervaluing your product. And so sometimes it's about actually figuring out who is my ideal customer and where am I pitching myself to? Am I a slightly higher price, higher than some of my competitors, but here is my value proposition. This is what I do differently or better that makes it be worthwhile for the individual. So that could be, for example, someone who's offering, consulting services. Rather than having an hourly rate, you could do propositions where you're actually offering the customer a set fee for an outcome, whether it takes you 10 hours or 2, that they're actually just paying for the outcome, not that ongoing hourly rate. And for some customers, they see that as a value because it's a known quantity. I know how much this is going to cost. I know what I'm getting and I'm paying for results. I'm not just, in this thing that could take you an unknown amount of time.
I like that. And I suppose the thing to be aware of too, if you are a kind of business in that situation, is that sometimes it's going to take you shorter, sometimes it's going to take you longer. It's all going to come out in the end.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And I guess the other thing, as I said before, you also need to be mindful if you are just trying to chase the cheaper end of the scale, there's other things that you don't take into consideration. Like there's only one of you. You can only do so much. You can't be everything to everyone. So you risk, burnout. You risk providing a product that doesn't meet the standards of what you typically would produce or offer to a customer. And so we just want to have that time where you're doing that reevaluation evaluation of your business and how you want to structure it, and then looking at how you can reposition yourself as a premium. So, for example, if we use that cleaner example, we could come back and say to the customer, look, I'm now doing it $45 an hour, but I've got more reliability, I'm flexible, even things like that brand message of I use eco-friendly products, or, the person who does your clean will be the same person who does it every time. So these aren't necessarily things that have anything to do with price, but it is a way of your keeping that brand loyalty, and being able to charge a little bit extra because the customer sees that they're getting something for that value.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. So we did actually cover this one.
A little bit. Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to say on this one?
So I guess that's going to be, I must admit, whenever I have worked with clients through the Tasmanian Business Advice Service, I'll be honest with you, the first conversation we always have is how many widgets is it going to take for you to break even? And it's a really nice number. Like, even I've had a client that I worked with previously, and we got all of really clear details of what she was seeking. And then we were able to break that down to, she needs to actually sell 180 medium coffees per day to be at break even. And so for her, that was a really good metric that she could track through the day. It was a motivation tool. And it just meant that if we're at break even for the coffee, then we're already into profit with those other add-ons. Every time I sell a cake on top of that coffee, well, that's not, that's another additional profit item, because I am really focused on getting those 180 coffees a day. And it's also on the other scale for people that are wanting to break into a new business, knowing how many widgets you have to make or sell to be able to get to the numbers that you need. Well, that's going to be a very clear picture if it's doable. There's no point setting out to start a coffee or a cafe if you're going to need to be doing 2,000 coffees a day to break even, because you're never going to get there.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that one up, because I think a lot of people kind of miss that when they get all excited about their new business idea. It's actually sitting down and looking at the numbers and what do I need to do in what time frame.
Absolutely. And again, because there are all those kinds of costs, I know that a lot of people that I'm dealing with are saying our overheads continue to grow, and, our fixed costs and our direct costs are all increasing. And so knowing what they are means that you can keep on top of that. And I guess that it also, again, is that beautiful data that means that, if we do have to raise our prices to cover costs, you do have the right words to reach out to your customers and actually explain to them why you're increasing your base costs. And like, I've worked with a young girl who's running a salon, and so because she's got a really good marketing list, she used that as an opportunity to email out to all of her customers, and just a very friendly and nonchalant sort of tone, basically advised them that she was going to have to put a $5 per person increase across all of her clients going forward because of the cost of materials raising for her. And for most of those people, she got a lot of feedback, very supportive and very positive, and thanks for letting me know. And so it is about building the relationship and understanding that whether we're a customer or a business owner, we need it. Oh, have I lost everyone?
No,
gotcha. So yeah, I just think, or I'm going to be saying this a lot, I'm sure, through the rest of this presentation, is simply put, you need data. You need to know all of your costs, missing things like rent or administration costs or wages. Like, as we get busier, we have more casual staff. So we just need to be mindful of all of those moving costs, because if it does lead to underpricing, then you're immediately going to be in that cash flow strain. And we all know that businesses survive on cash flow.
Fantastic. Okay, before we move on, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up on this topic? I love that you're a data geek too. I've just got to say that.
It's so important. And the thing is even if that's not, when we're talking data, it's really just about tracking it as you go. Because even if it isn't your thing, even if you aren't someone like me who thinks that Excel saves lives, data is something that if you have it, you can bring it to someone like me, and not only can we drill down and get more information and more understanding of your business, but I can explain it to you. And, you know, just like that example with the cans of Coke, like a 30% increase on their drink revenue when pretty much 100% of their customers were getting a drink. This is a major impact to their bottom line. And I understand their thoughts and their philosophy around why they've priced and chose that pricing strategy. But unless you're actually getting recognition for it, I would say that they're in a much better situation. And it's led to them also doing things like having other drinks in their, they've now got energy drinks, which are much more profitable for them. So again, it's all about the data. If we know, then we can adjust accordingly.
And the time it takes to gather that and to track that is clearly time well spent in a business.
Absolutely. And it's a little bit like a stitching time saves 9. Like, honestly, if you're tracking data as you go, if you're taking the time to look at technology options and investing in technology that provides data insight for you, if we do it as we go, then it's far simpler. And I guess one of those unintended benefits is if you're on top of your data, then by definition, you're on top of your tax, you're on top of all of that stuff, because it's just something that's part of your actual standard process. And, you know, at any given time, you've got a better idea and visual on your profitability than your accountant does.
Yeah, excellent point. Love that. All right. So question number 4.
My favourite one. I'm going to hammer home that you must pay yourself.
Yes. So what are the key types of costs businesses must consider when setting prices?
Absolutely. So we break these down into 3 basic costs. So direct costs are materials or goods tied directly to each sale. The things that, you know, the base products that you need to put into your widget to turn into that thing that you're selling. Then we've got your semi-direct costs. So these are things like labour, which fluctuates with sales volume. You know, you can have a projection, but we're going to only do best guess when we're doing assumptions in budgeting. And then you've got your overheads. So these are those ongoing things like rent, software, insurance, all of those things that you need to actually have the position or the space to be able to sell. So for me, too often business or small business owners particularly they only account for those direct costs, the things that I've actually spent money on to get together to make them, forgetting the hidden impact of things like admin time, their unpaid time, and any of those kind of background expenses. So if we're in a situation where you might end up where you've got prices that look like they're profitable, but when you actually drill down into that data, you're either not making money or you're making such a small amount, it's not worth your time.
So can you just give us a few more examples of each of the different types of costs?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, those direct costs, these ones can be expenses that are directly traced to producing a specific product or delivering a service. So they vary with production or sales volume. So the more you make, the more direct costs you have. So these would be things like, and I've got a great example of a lady I had who had an embroidery a business, but it was basically, we bought some machines and they were just in a separate building that they had, and she would set them running at night. So whilst the business in her mind made quite a bit of money for her, we didn't factor in any of her time at all. And so when it came time to look at trying to sell that business, her expectation of the value of that business was far higher than it actually was, because once we factored in an actual wage for the actual time spent that needed to be spent, it wasn't necessarily, as profitable as her perception of that. So again, going back to those direct costs, it's all about the things. So embroidery thread for her, it could be ingredients for a cafe, it could be parts for a mechanic, it could be packaging, any of those kinds of things that you need to obtain to be able to actually make the sale. Then we've got those semi-direct costs. So these ones are related to production or service, but they may not vary perfectly with each unit sold. So these are things like the owner's labour, casual staff wages. So we've suddenly got an influx of busyness, so we need to actually have more staff for a short period, machinery maintenance or servicing, things like power, any of these things that kind of vary, but they are those semi-direct costs. And then lastly, as we said, those overheads. So these are those indirect costs required to run the business, but not directly tied to individual products or their services. So they're often quite fixed and they're often recurring. So they're the things we always know about: the rent, things like software subscriptions, your phone, internet, marketing, insurance, administrative wages, bookkeeping, all of those kind of fixed reoccurring expenses that are like provide the vehicle with which we can actually act out through our business and make a sale or offer our goods for service or services for people to use, etc. So I always like to try and do some case studies with all of these ones. So cafes are a really great one where you can actually see quite quickly. A lot of people will factor in, this item, I make this much money on it because either the food costs, but we're not apportioning to that item its share of those indirect or those fixed costs. And so we need to actually look at our pricing strategy to go, roughly each item, I can't really break it down because, if I sell more of an item, the number goes lower, but I need to actually make sure that my pricing strategy factors in those expenses so I know that I'm covering them and that I get to that break-even point.
Yeah, fantastic.
So I will go and say like the one of the ones that, again, I just want to hammer home on this one, that why labour costs can make or break profitability. So again, if you don't include the value of your time, you're not building a real business. It really isn't a real business, because although you may have some busyness and you may well have some fairly well paid staff, but it's kind of like you're doing all of this action and activity and not being rewarded for your contribution to that.
No, excellent point. I love that. Okay, so Danielle, how can businesses choose the best pricing strategy for their type of business?
So it's going to be, for most businesses, you're probably not necessarily going to stick with one. It kind of depends on where you are and what you're trying to achieve. So there's basically 4 that I think are the ones that most people kind of move between. So what the correct pricing strategy for you is going to be dependent on what you're selling, who your customers are, what your business goals are. So it's a bigger picture thing, but we can pull it down into those 4 basic ones. So the first one is cost plus pricing. So this is basically adding a markup to your costs. And I'll give some more details, but I'll just go through all of them. The next one is what we call value-based pricing. So this is based on what the customer believes it's worth. So if you're moving into that space where your item has a brand or some kind of like a connection that a customer can make, which they feel they identify with, and then they're more likely to pay a little extra because that's something that they're connected to. The next one is what we call penetration pricing. So that's that low initial pricing to try and build up some market share. But again, it is a risky strategy because you could get yourself into a position where you've got a market share that you can't retain because they have an expectation of ongoing low prices. And then the third one that I always talk through is that tiered pricing, which I love because I think it's one of those things where if you give people choice, even something simple as having 3 different sizes of coffee, I think what you find, especially if you price things appropriately, you'll find that people will upsell themselves to a higher or a bigger profit. And I would suspect that the overheads and costs for a small coffee are going to be pretty similar to that of a large one, but the price difference can be quite significant to you. So the bottom line is there's no one size fits all answer. The key is to match your strategy to your market position and what your profit goals are. So and it's okay to kind of blend them, to move between different ones. So to give you a bit of an example for each one, if for cost plus pricing, so something as simple as a stationery provider that I worked with, they basically had a flat 40% markup on all of their goods. And what they found is some things sold instantly and other things didn't sell for a long time. So there's, on one side, we've got, questions about profitability because we've got additional carrying costs for things that aren't selling. But more importantly, if some things are selling really, really quickly, if we actually drill down and actually look at that data, there might be some scope where on those items, you could make that flat markup 50% or 60%. So it's really about maximising what is reasonably what the market's willing to pay. Then for the value-based pricing, so this can be, as we talked about before, something as simple as repositioning yourself to be a cleaner who's eco-friendly and aware of allergens and cleans accordingly. So this can be seen where the customer may say, well, I'm willing to pay a bit extra because I'm getting something for that bit extra that I'm paying for.
Danielle, can I jump in with a question there? We've had
Sure.
someone in the audience ask about the last pricing structure that you mentioned. If you're going to repeat what that was.
So the value-based pricing?
I think so, by the sounds of
Yeah.
it.
So this one is one where, again, it's data driven, but it's also about how you perceive your business, your brand, and who your customer is, who your client is. So oftentimes it can be something as simple as I'm going to align my the offering that I have for the individual, so that they feel like it's worthy of a higher price because they're not only getting the goods or service that you're selling, but there's also something that they connect with. So it can be, people have a lot of feelings about, eco-friendly or, rustic or something that I actually link to my personality. Yes, that makes it a value proposition to me. I see there's a value to this item to me that's greater than just, the actual price that you're selling it to me for. So I'm going to choose yours over someone else because I have a connection to that item.
Right, and I think we've had an expansion on the question. There were 4 that were mentioned: cost plus profit, value-based pricing, penetration pricing, and then there was a last one. I think that they
Yeah,
may have missed it. What that?
excellent. It's kind of my favorite one too. So it's
Oh,
tiered
beautiful.
pricing. It's my absolute favorite because I think it works. I won't be gendered and say, but I think it works on women a little bit more than men. It just becomes a situation where I've got a choice to make. And so it's kind of like, it's a little bit like I can have, one for $10 or 2 for 15. It's a little bit like, and I use coffee as the example because it's a clear one, because you can, if we've figured out your widget number and you need to sell 180 medium coffees to break even, if you can get 20 or 30% of your customers to self upsell to a larger one, well, the price difference between the two is going to be direct profit. So someone might look at, it's $6 for a little one, it's $7 for a medium one, and it's $8 for a large one. It's worth that extra dollar. So that tiered pricing just gives people that opportunity to upsell themselves. I see it a lot in things like when you go to get the car washed. I think there's a lot of people that struggle between the top, middle, and lower price. And, I think that humans tend to go, well, I won't have the very worst, and I want to save a bit of money, so I won't have the very expensive, but I will take the middle option, mummy bear instead of baby bear. And what that kind of extrapolates to is I was going to buy the cheaper one. I've now upsold myself into that medium-sized one. And I think if you give people that choice, you'll see that there will be people that will make that upsell for themselves.
On that car wash example too, like real world example, I went and did that just recently, and the difference between the bottom and the medium, like the middle one, was only $2, and the same between the middle and the top. So for me, it was like no brainer. I'm going to go with the top one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really does work, and I do it every time, even though I don't think my car actually gets any cleaner. But it's like $4 between the bottom and the top.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's all about the perception, isn't it? It's the perception of quality. They have extra things listed that I don't really need, but
they get me at Lava Car Wash every time. I don't know if the rainbow bubbles do anything, but I get rainbow bubbles every time. It's a little bit like a dance for me. But as you say, it's that $4 doesn't mean too, like it's, I may as well get the best one. And I don't know whether the car gets any well cleaner or if the fancy wax thing does anything. But what I do know for the actual business owner is that an extra $4 per car that's a big day. That's a big change between what the day was and what the day will be. So, and again, especially seeing it that with that kind of business, it's just the individual pressing buttons on a machine. So again, it just gives you that opportunity to upsell and try and allow them to upsell for themselves.
Excellent. So you elaborated more on the cost plus pricing, and we jumped to the tiered pricing. Did you have anything more to say on value-based?
So the value-based one is really just about linking your product to your brand.
That's
so
right.
you know, like I've had a guy who's wanting to do a wellness retreat, and as we talked about, it's all Instagram moments for that. If that's going to work, then it needs to be in the right location. So it's really just about letting people be willing to spoil themselves and pay a bit more to get something that they're connected to. And then the last one to talk about is that penetration pricing, which is one of those ones that I can see the merit for it, but I think you have to be really strategic when we're looking at penetration pricing, and have a strategy for how you're going to get back to sustainable. Because there's no point, like, it's all well and good to try and get market share, but if it's the wrong market, you're just going to lose them because they're just discount or price hunters. And again, that burnout is a question for me. I'd rather you clean 3 houses at $45 an hour than 10 at $25 an hour. So I do think that if we're doing penetration pricing, we're better off to do things like offer a discount for 3 months, or a discount coupon that's valid for a period of time. Or for me, it's like, as I said earlier, I think it's also about finding that middle ground where you would say to a client, I've got, use loyalty as part of it. So the first 4 cleans are $45 an hour, but the 5th one is free. And it's then you're, having that opportunity to build a relationship, and they've got, just like the 10th coffee's free. It's that loyalty, but also offering people like an incentive, which is, I'm not going to be able to provide you this price for forever because it's not sustainable, profitability wise, but I can offer it to you for now.
Yeah, I love that. And if I could just drop in an example there as well. I was speaking to a young web designer just last week, and we were talking about, he wanted to start selling his services, like building a one-page website for quite a low price. And then I started having the conversation with him about, well, client retention, how you don't just want to do a one and done. How can you keep the relationship and perhaps get them on a retainer or a subscription model? And we talked about the possibility of, for the initial website setup, you then build in for a little bit extra the first 6 months of updates and security checks. Because that, like you said, gives the opportunity to build the relationship, build the customer satisfaction, meet their expectations, and then they're likely, when it's time to renew that, like looking at another 12 months of updates and support, then they're a lot more likely to jump in at whatever the full cost is, as long as you've obviously communicated in the first instance that, it is a lower price to start with. So there's lots of different ways that you can do that really smartly, and really talking to the customer retention piece, I think, is really important.
The other one I would put into that one is, I had a client that I worked with who was a photographer, and I didn't understand, this is many, many years ago, I didn't understand why, but as part of his wedding packages that he would do for everyone, he would offer a free family portrait for the birth of their first child.
Oh, wow.
So, and it was just free. Like, we're happy to get married, and you can come back to me at any point, and I'm happy to do like a family portrait. And what he basically said is 100% of the time people would allow him to take other photos, they would buy other photos, but more importantly, it started a relationship. So we've got that lovely family photo that's from when Bubby was born. Now we've got a second child. Well, we want to do that again. So it is also just about that sort of throwaway idea of something that is about you're offering something that's value. People may or may not take it. And sure, I'm sure there would have been customers who came back, got one family photo, and that was it. So there was no further income for him from that. But I'm sure if we take averages, he would have, in the longer term, made significant sales just as part of, that's an add-on for that package that I offer for all my clients.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right, let's jump to the next question. So now, you have already kind of touched on this one, but how should businesses communicate price increases to their customers?
So I think with this one, the short answer is honesty is the best policy. Yep. It is uncomfortable, but it really is part of sustainable business generally, and more so since COVID. And so I think that a lot of people we've seen shrinkflation, people have come to realise that coffees aren't $4 anymore. But I feel like it's really just having, in the same way, it's a little bit like however you'd like to be treated, that's how you need to treat your customers. So it's about being proactive, honest, but keep the conversation focused on value. So communicate nice and clearly, give them notice, explain that, that what's going to change, whether it's better quality or, whatever your reason is. It could be simple as just being honest and saying, look, wages have increased, overheads have increased, I just need to raise my prices a little bit. The truth is, I think if you're upfront with your customers, most of them will basically be quite understanding, and basically be taking in that message that's it's part of life, and it's really just about growth, not just an extra cost, but it's about ensuring that you maintain trust and loyalty, and just I guess being honest about saying, well, I need to protect my margins, or else there's no point me being here. So that was the example that I gave with the hairdresser. And to be honest, she found that to be it was actually a really good rapport building process for her, because most of her customers responded back saying, oh, only $5, you're fantastic, book me in. So she got quite a lot of bookings from that process. So I do think communication does lead to other sales. So I just think it's about being upfront, being honest, and then also just making sure that your message is focused on improving value or better service or added features. So just like you said with your web designer. So again, something exactly that same thing. So it's kind of like, yes, I do have to put my prices up, but I'm going to add this additional thing so you don't really feel like you're still getting value. And it's rather than it being viewed as a price rise, it's viewed as an upgrade. It's an upgrade to the service that you're accessing.
Yeah. Fantastic. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add on that point, or?
So again, I'm always going to go and say, just generally along in this topic, it's all about data. You need to get really good, clear data about where you're making money, because if we do it enough times in all those different areas, that item that we had a fixed markup on, we can do it. If we do it more strategically, we can mark, a lower margin on the things that aren't going to take that high margin and will sell quicker, a higher margin on things that do sell quickly. And then the other one is, the whole purpose of this is getting your pricing strategy right, so that you're paid. That I just see so often, especially when it's a family business, when we actually really start factoring how much additional labour your partner puts in, or the hours the kids do on the weekend. When you start factoring in those kinds of hours, you really do need to look at your pricing strategy to make sure that it's actually worthwhile for you to be doing what you're doing.
I think that's a very important point. So we've come to the end of the official questions. So I'd just like to give a few people some time to pop some questions in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll let Kelly moderate that for a moment. While you do that, I'd just like to remind everyone about what Kelly talked about earlier, the Tasmanian Business Advice Service. And again, Danielle is one of the advisors on that. So there's two options for businesses. If you've had an ABN for 12 months or less, then you can actually access 2 hours of free business advice under the new business support program. And if you've had an ABN for 12 months or more, you can access up to 5 hours of business advice and support through the Tasmanian Business Advice Service. And the way you access that is you can either Google Tasmanian Business Advice Service, or just go straight to Business Tasmania, and they will absolutely point you in the right direction. And, even reach out to the TCCI. I know just about all of the advisors. I've made it my business to have a relationship with them all. So I actually like to refer directly to specific advisors who nail the topic that people need. And I'm sure Business Tasmania would do exactly the same thing, because Kelly's got her stuff very well trained. So do we have any questions?
And not to game the system at all, just not to game the system at all. The program resets on the 1st of July. So if you're wavering, you could get your 2 or 5 hours now and then re-enroll in the program on the 1st of July. So that's a lot of free time. And my history or background is financial counselling, and we love free things. So it's a really great way to have someone tweak your business plan, challenge your marketing plan. You know, why wouldn't you, you know, even if you've just got a crazy idea of a business that's on the tips of something you want to do, it's really good to have a sounding board to be able to have that chat and get some direction and get some, you know, my clients always love it because I always give them a little bit of homework. So I really do recommend the program, not just because I'm one of the business advisors, but because it is a really valuable program.
Absolutely. And schedule some time into your diary now to sit down, gather your data, so then you can make an appointment and really get the most out of your time.
Absolutely. And that's a great tip, Danielle. Make the most of those free hours now, and then again, starting from 1 July. Now, we do have a virtual hand raised, and I think Josh is enabling the functionality to unmute. I'll just check with Josh whether that's happened.
Yes, I've enabled their microphone, so if they just unmute their microphone, they'll be able to ask a question.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're ready for that question. So we might be having a problem with the mute, which sometimes happens. Oh, here we are. I think, let's see, we're still happy to ask the question when you're ready. We only have one hand raised at the moment, so that's you.
I think it's cyber hair.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And if you are struggling with the mute, you can always put something in the Q&A or the chat.
Yeah, that's right. So feel free, the Q&A and the chat's both enabled at the moment. So feel free to pose the question there, and I can ask the ladies, or unmute and ask the question. For any follow-up questions, absolutely get back in touch with Business Tas, and we can, depending on the question, we can connect you with Danielle, or it might be a Mikala question, or one of the business advisors for the free support. So I know it's sometimes you walk away and you think about everything and then you have a question. So, you know, you can always come back to us. Let's see. Are we ready to unmute for that question? No, it doesn't look like we've got any questions right now, ladies.
I might take a quick stab in the dark because I feel like this might be a question about overheads. So I just wanted to flag, ask. And whether you need someone like me to ask for you, this is the best advice that I can give you. I have a client who is who's come through this program, and she's really in a challenging situation with her cafe. So we went to her landlord and asked the question, and he's halved her rents for the remainder of the year. So he fully understands they need each other. If she leaves, if her business ends, then the likelihood is his cafe will be empty for a fairly long period of time, because it's an area where we've probably got too many purveyors of food. So again, gather your data, do your research, find people like me and just ask, because the worst thing that can happen is they can say no, you won't catch on fire. But for my client, it's changed her. She's so motivated now because she's in a point now where she can not only cover her rent, she's actually addressing a little bit of rent arrears that she's got. And this is an agreement they have in writing for the remainder of the year. So, you know, 7 months of half rent, that's going to make a major, major, major impact for her.
Absolutely. And we do have that question now. What is the best way to communicate price increases for a larger clientele?
So it's going to depend on how you access people. Yep. So depending on the kind of business that you're in. So with my lovely salon lady, she was so proactive at getting people's contact details and really good at actually marketing email direct marketing. If you're in a situation where it's predominantly Facebook, then I would say, or that kind of online marketing. So the first step is making sure that you update everywhere. So you need to go through and if wherever you are, all of the social medias, your web page, everywhere, make sure that those changes to your prices are updated. And then I would acknowledge them. I think it's worth a post, worth a social media post. And again, it's that twofold, being upfront why we've increased our prices, and then also trying to frame that message for value add. So rather than it just being a price increase, it's a change in service. So I feel like I'm actually getting someone.
Perfect. And we have a different question. Do you know or recommend any software for practicing yield management pricing on an automatic basis?
So I know it depends on what industry you're in. So for me, Rural Financial Counsellor, I know that Xero have a number of add-ons that actually do direct management of those kinds of things. So it kind of depends on what industry you're in. But again, I think that, not to overplug the Business Tasmania programs, but this is the kind of thing where coming and seeing one of the business advisors, we can actually sit down, get a much clearer picture of specifically what you want, not only what needs to go in, what you want to come out, and then actually find the best software for your specific circumstances. Because I think for most people, it's never going to be a one size fits all.
Great. Thanks, Danielle. And are there any other questions we have for Danielle or Mikala? Looks like we've answered all of our questions. So thank you both. That was a great presentation and a lot was covered. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up today?
No, not specifically, but again, the offer's always there. I love to drill down into other people's Excel and just try and help you get a much clearer picture of your business, and how we get you to the point where you're getting paid for the efforts that you're making.
Yeah,
fantastic. I do just want to just build on something that Danielle said, that comes up a lot. Know your client. Like, that's so important. Know who your target market is, know who your client is, because that then informs the way you can upsell and do all the things that you do with your pricing strategy. That's going to help inform the best strategy for you. So, and I'm coming from my marketing background in this, but really know who your client is. And again, if you struggle with that, reach out to TBAS or Business Tasmania and they can point you in the right direction with people who can help you do that.
And just adding on to that one is that same client who we got half rent for, she mentioned that a lot of the businesses it's duplication. They're all doing the same thing, offering the same food. And I sort of said, well, what's your differentiator? She said, I do roasts. I do a good roast, and I have a lot of the Nana set. They come in quite regularly, and so we talked it through. And where she was is a large retirement village, an area like a retirement provider. So she's now the equivalent of paid Meals on Wheels. So she does her roasts. She now packages them up into containers. She's got a lot of single men who get 10 meals at a time. She delivers it to them. They whack them in the freezer, and it's just an instant ding dinner. And this is, I suspect that in this financial year, this is going to end up being like 30% of her business, because she has one day off. She does all those meals up, delivers them all up there, and this is how she's going to trade out of the position that she's in, and she's embracing it. Like I'm the Nana Cafe, excellent, and they're all coming for a roast, and I have 3 different kinds every day, so it's fantastic.
Yep. Awesome. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. And thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Mikala. So that was workshop 3 in the Cost of Doing Business series. We have 2 more workshops to attend in the next 2 weeks. So same time over the next 2 weeks. To book in, you can go to the Business Tasmania event calendar, which is at the top of the Business Tasmania website in the header, to book your seat, so to speak, virtual seat, and no cost. So it's a great series we're delivering with the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So thank you again for your time, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Thank you.